How are you, commissioners? Are all settled in here? Anybody need a minute? Okay, ready enough. Well, good morning. It's Wednesday, July 9th, and day 3 of the Douglas County budget hearings for our 2026 budget. For those of you who are here, thank you for being here. If you're watching online, welcome. If you have been watching, I apologize for the repetition, but for those who are new, these budget hearings are for informational purposes only. We don't really make any decisions at these hearings. We also don't take public comment at these hearings. If you would like to provide public comment, you can provide public comment at any time in writing or giving us a call. And we do take public comment at our meetings. Our general business meeting is tonight at 5:30. We'll probably go home in between here and there. And you're welcome to provide some public comment at that time if you'd like to do it that way. Today, we're going to start off with emergency services, which includes LDCFM, emergency communications, and emergency management. Then at 10 o'clock, we are talking with our economic development partners. And we'll finish today at, we won't finish at 11, but we'll start with targeted youth populations. Let me say that again. Targeted populations, youth. We're not going to target youth. Yes. At 11 o'clock. Sarah, are you kicking us off on this one?
I am.
Okay.
I have the privilege of doing the overview for emergency services. I thought we would start with emergency management and emergency communications since their budgets are a little smaller, and then we'll move on to Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical. So emergency management's budget starts on page 88 in your budget book. Emergency management has 1.5 FTE funded by the EMPG grant, which is the Emergency Management Preparedness Grant, Performance Grant. And their expenses are not reflected in the budget on that page. They're included in the grant fund. Their budget is the same as the prior year with the exception of personnel-related increases. Emergency management did submit one supplemental for one-time funding for a training exercise related to the World Cup, and it was included in the proposed budget. Emergency communications budget starts on page 84. ECC serves as the primary public safety answering point, or PSAP, and dispatch point for Douglas County. Through an agreement updated in 2024, the cities of Lawrence, Baldwin City, and Eudora share, along with Douglas County, share in the costs of these services. The agreement is based on the county paying the first 1/3, and then the cities splitting the remainder based off their population. And 2026 is the last year that we're going to phase in to that agreement for the cities of Baldwin City and Eudora. There was quite a bit of a shift in expense, so we did a phase into that. So in 2026, they will pay their full population-based share. Additional funding was included in the proposed budget for overtime to support 2 additional call takers during the World Cup. It was included so that the cities could be prepared for that expense. However, we only bill actuals. So if we don't become a base camp and we don't need to use that overtime, we won't bill them for it. We also included $169,000 for additional Motorola contract expenses and with our new Motorola contract agreement, and that is included in the proposed budget. Okay, I'm ready to move to LDCFM, or maybe we thought we would, you want me to do the overview for everybody? I'll do the overview for everyone and then we'll take questions. Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical is under shared costs, which is on page 24 of your budget outline, and then they have their own narrative separate tab. Under that tab, the Board of County Commissioners has communication from Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical from late May related to the budget options that LDCFM needed to submit to the Lawrence City Manager for their proposed reductions. You reviewed those options on May 28th with LDCFM in a work session. You also have a May 30th memo that outlines the Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical EMS revenue projections. These 2 pieces together combine in the proposed budget under that shared cost line. We estimated $3.5 million in EMS revenue for 2026, and the gray option, as it's become affectionately known, which minimizes EMS reductions by maintaining 6 battalion chiefs, maintaining the training lieutenant, and maintaining 7 24-hour-a-day staffed ambulances. Also, this option shifts this cost share between the City of Lawrence and Douglas County from 61.75 for the City of Lawrence and 38.25 for Douglas County. As commissioners are aware, our current governance agreement is 64-36. So 61.75 to 64, and then 36 is what Douglas County currently pays, and this will shift it to 38.25. This reduces the number of FTE for Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical as called for under the City of Lawrence budget reductions from 18 to 10. Also included in the proposed budget is a transfer from the general fund to the Ambulance Capital Reserve Funds, Fund 604, for $1,230,000 to support the purchase of 2 ambulances in 2026. Also included in the 2025 CIP, so our current CIP, is $4 million towards Station 6 expansion. Commissioners, earlier this week, we gave you a slide from a PowerPoint that the City of Lawrence used for their CIP that outlined potential operating expenses for the Station 6 expansion. Those are going to hit in 2027. So 1 year after this budget you're currently deliberating. And the initial estimates of what that station will cost just the county in 2027 is $2 million. So that's about 1 mil for us. And commissioners, that's all I have in terms of an overview.
Thank you, Sarah. All right. At this point, why don't we start with any questions for emergency management or emergency communications?
I have a question for emergency communications. In your narrative, it talks about IT positions. We also heard from the sheriff's office that they cover IT for emergency communications. So can you talk to me about what those positions, how those are different, and what services you're getting from sheriff's office IT?
Yeah, our situation in the ECC is kind of different. We have a shared pool of IT from the sheriff's office that works on their network. And then we, as an entity, also do IT ourselves through our vendors that service our systems. And I know I saw your question yesterday to maybe get into the radio side of it. The radio side, we do have a radio technician that services all the radios in the county or county owned. That's separate from that IT situation. So we kind of use a mix of both our own IT that we do between administration with the ECC and then the sheriff's office IT. In the future, we would hope to be able to move some of the stuff that we do from the administration side to the sheriff's office, but their capacity is not there right now.
Generally, they're on the sheriff's network, and their folks focus on the radios.
Kind of a follow-up to the line in your narrative, it talks about the IT support specialist, manager, network admin, and IT analyst are budgeted at 20% of the total salary. Can you talk to me? What does that mean?
Yeah, we have line items in our budget, and 20% of their salaries are afforded onto our budget. So you'll actually see their positions, their FTEs, the sheriff's office IT FTEs are charged 20% of their salaries on my budget.
And that's so that we can reflect those costs more easily onto the cities for that governance arrangement.
Thanks, that's a help. And also, so there'll be a moving of buildings from your current location to the public safety building. In terms of IT, what are some of the needs anticipated there? I'm thinking specifically IT for that startup and transition.
Startup and transition is going to be significant on the IT side. We have a very, very complex network, not only within the work that the IT department's going to do locally for our network, for the sheriff's office network, but also the coordination of the vendors that come in and do the work for the various different networks. We use 4 different networks that come into our center. We have one from the sheriff's office and then 3 contractual vendors that do networks within our system.
So I know the Motorola contract. What are the others?
We have Motorola, AT&T for the 911 service, and then we have Aviat for our microwave service.
Okay, thanks.
Do you know what the timeline is for moving into the new building at this point?
We just had this conversation yesterday, and right now, what I was told yesterday from J.E. Dunn was that we're looking at probably the second week of May is probably about close to the time frame, but they aren't 100% sure yet, and we will be giving dates in the very near future.
Yeah, I was just comparing that to the World Cup calendar, and I suspect you don't want to be moving during the World Cup.
Assuming we're a base camp. So I would say if we're not a base camp, life becomes a lot easier in terms of when to make that transition. But the hard part is that we have to decide that move date before we know if we're a base camp. So we're in conversations with Dunn about that timeline, and we will make sure that we have continuity of operations as the primary objective over the convenience of the construction manager.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody at this table is aware that construction projects tend to slip.
And that's what I actually think. I think this is a pretty aggressive. I actually think they may slip further into July, although, they're working really hard to get everything under a roof so that they can work internally over the winter. So we'll see.
Thanks.
So I'd just like to confirm so I understand. So the sheriff's IT budget, if that is not fully approved, does that impact your IT infrastructure? Like how connected is your IT infrastructure to their infrastructure?
I do want to note the sheriff does currently have several IT staff. And so this would be in addition to that.
Yeah, the current structure wouldn't be impacted. It's just the additions that we see coming in the near future. With the technology changes, there's more emphasis on IT backside support. And we're finding that we're spending a lot more time from our administration side working on IT projects. And that's why there's an ask to be able to have an additional IT support from the sheriff's office. But with the current budget that we've had over the last several years, it wouldn't impact anything that we're doing today.
Okay, but as we look ahead and future projects and or future potential work that's coming down, it would be beneficial to have that extra resource. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, yes. Currently, we're seeing a shift, and especially in the emergency services world, going to a lot of different technologies that are cloud-based that take a lot of administration on the backside to be able to make sure that they're running, and less vendor controlled and more locally controlled administration. And there's a shift to the virtual world with AI that is kind of like the unknown right now, but we've seen that there's more of an emphasis on the IT support side comparatively to hardware that just worked in the past.
Okay, so for continuity of work and for both entities to work like seamlessly together, having that extra resource, even though not knowing what's going to happen in the future, but potentially having that budget line item could improve continuity of work in the future?
Oh, for sure. And the other piece that is kind of the structure that's happening right now is that as we continue to expand our technological advances in the industry, we're still trying to do a lot more with the same amount of people. And what we're finding is that we're not getting the best value out of the systems that we're purchasing because we don't have the capacity to be able to invest the time to be able to really fully flesh out some of these systems.
Okay. And then if those resources were approved, and I do realize that these are sheriff resources, but they are shared resources, right? Could you just like talk a little bit about like maybe how that would be reported back to the county commission? Like just in like, how would you talk about how those resources are benefiting the county?
Well, we can, every time that we have a new system and every time that we have something new that we bring online to be able to help the citizens and that call 911 or have emergency services be delivered, every piece of those systems currently have IT support on the backside. So to be able to bring new services to the table and be able to bring new things to the citizens when they call 911, be able to, as it be location services, translation services for 911 radio, those very complex systems will be able to be more, I guess, seamless. And that would be one way that we could show the benefit of adding more IT support to the system.
Thank you.
And I'd say like we need to do a better job of making sure that we do regular updates to the commission on some of these areas that are a little less high profile and a little more backbone infrastructure related to the commission, but it is really technical. But there's a number of different systems coming down from the state too. They're going to require this team to implement. They're going to require this team to manage and monitor. And it's an incredibly complex environment. And you all see the contracts that they have come before you, but it's hard to always know what that means to a caller into 911.
And to the public too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, absolutely.
One piece that I can highlight and just the emphasis of how quickly the IT world can change and evolve and the support that it's needed is 3 years ago, we didn't talk a whole lot about cybersecurity. 3 years now, I have 4 different cybersecurity packages on 4 different networks. And each one of those are evolving on a daily basis because of the threats that are out there and the threats that were recognized and the threats that need to be mitigated. And we need to make sure that we keep those systems as robust as possible.
Thank you.
Sarah, okay, so we had a technology request for 2 FTE yesterday from the sheriff. Then today we're talking about technology, how the sheriff supports ECC, which is actually a non-elected position. And then tomorrow we have networking. We have 3 requests from IT. Can you help me understand why it's important to have separate IT departments here and why we wouldn't just have one person coming to us with the IT requests?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm going to say you have an independently elected sheriff.
Right.
So, he has some responsibilities for things to maintain that he would want under his control. That'd be my assumption. Other than that, this isn't dissimilar to certain departments where we have subject matter experts on certain pieces of software that work in a department. Brooke is a system lead for our finance and enterprise system. She works for me. She doesn't work in IT. So I think sometimes it's about the work that they are particularly doing and where it fits best into the organization. Having someone that can program radios, troubleshoot radios for our own departments, plus city departments, plus townships, plus public works departments makes to me more sense that it is located under Tony's supervision because they deal most closely with it. But the underlying fiber network, the underlying network systems are maintained mostly by our IT department. The sheriff has their own network, but some of their hardware still sits on our system. So I know it's complex. I do not believe it's a duplication of service. I think it's about trying to balance centralized services with a decentralized specialist that's working closer to the people it serves. Does that help at all?
That's really helpful. I mean, I think especially as you highlight other departments that we may not see a budget request
Right.
this year, but have that are, if they're dedicated to a very specific type of software or equipment, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think it's just hard to sort of figure out where that is as a commissioner when you're looking at the whole picture. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, a laptop in a car for a deputy is very different than my laptop on my desk.
Yeah.
And it runs different software packages. The kind of, there's AVL, there's station alerting that ECC does. Robert has tornado sirens and radio sirens that his department manages with a vendor. That doesn't take away from what Starla and her team do. And then Starla's team can provide resources when it comes to, analyzing data, our website, our email, those types of resources. And I'm really proud of how our team works collaboratively together. I think we've made a lot of progress in that regard. Also, this is a conversation with district court because they have state-funded IT positions, but our IT department provides a lot of backbone and responsibility for the court system because they're located in our buildings.
Thanks.
I have a couple of questions, a little nitty gritty, and they're for Sarah. So the two new call takers for 2026, that one time, and that was included in the budget, but it didn't come to us as a supplemental.
Yeah, it was just overtime. So these aren't new call takers. So this would be additional overtime dollars that would be allocated to existing staff to serve in that function during World Cup.
Okay.
It could have been a supplemental request. I could have pulled it out for you. We just, since it was overtime, I generally don't have supplemental requests for overtime.
Okay, thanks. And the other was, so ECC started dispatching for the MRT within this calendar year. Was there funding that, and I'm sure we approved it, but was there funding that went with that? And is that reflected in the budget here?
Actually, no, they added that, sir. They absorbed that additional responsibility without asking for additional resources. But maybe Tanya. That was my Tony Sonia combo. Could talk a little bit about how that's going. So, man, sorry, guys.
With the MRT services, I wouldn't say it caused enough additional workload to where we would need to have additional people to support that. Really, we implemented new training, new processes, and then we were able to help people that were calling us anyways, rather than not having a resource for them. So, I don't think that it would ever really impact our budget or FTE to be able to support that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. One last question. That's right, Mr. Chair. So you mentioned that the ECC manages the radios for all the county-owned radios. Does that count? Who manages the IT around radios that are owned by our smaller first responder departments?
We've been providing technical assistance, things that don't budget or don't impact the budget line to all the agencies, as long as they are a Astra P25 Motorola system, because we don't want to invest into other technologies that we don't support. But we don't provide any monetary or budgetary to the cities of Lawrence, city of Lawrence, city of Eudora, city of Baldwin, or Willow, or Palmyra Township. So if budgetarily, they provide any type of funding for any new equipment, but then we will help on the technical advice for the programming and any type of code changes.
I have a follow-up question to that. Are all the various county fire departments using the same types of radio now?
We're probably about 80% Motorola and about 20% Kenwood right now. The Kenwood radios were introduced as a cost-saving measure from a couple of our fire departments. They work on the system well, but we just don't have any expertise in them.
Any more questions for emergency communications? Emergency management? I didn't have any questions. Thank you, Robert. All right, LDCFM. Feel like we've had lots of conversations about LDCFM. As I was going through my paperwork, I'm like, I'm not sure what more I might ask, but maybe commissioners have other thoughts.
I would just maybe start off by saying that, this is a huge, there are some unknowns about the status of this request, and because of the timing between the city and the county and our budget processes, I'm not sure how to reconcile the expansion of Station 6 with what I have before me for the reductions for the 2026 budget for the city of Lawrence. My understanding is that Station 6 is included in the city manager's proposed budget, the building of the station. My team is in conversations about that design, that total cost, land acquisition for that station. You don't want to build a fire station and not have any firefighters in it. So to me, the bigger expense is related to the operations of Station 6. My best guess right now is that will cost us $2 million, the county alone, to operate our portion to operate that station annually, every year. So I just think it's something that the commission needs to be thinking about as they put together their final budget, is how will we accommodate that amount? I want to be clear that I can't guarantee in 2027 that we will have $2 million available under an existing mill levy to pay for that expansion. City of Lawrence has been very upfront that it will require them to raise taxes, in my view. I think the same could be said of us. We might have a good year and be able to afford that under an existing mill levy, but we may not. So that is a 1 mil increase for us if it is on top of our existing levy.
So I will admit I didn't watch the meeting last night with the city. So since our fire and medical partners are here, I'd be interested to what you heard from the city from that standpoint. To Sarah's question, like, how do you expand stations while contracting operations? Did they share a plan with you for that?
Last night at the city commission meeting, a plan was not shared. It was outlined in the presentation that the city gave to the commission, noting that Station 6 is on the CIP, is recommended as being funded. That open date would be 2029. The information that the city had shared about 2027, I think, was more of their preparation for building up financial support for the operating expenses for opening in 2029. As far as staffing, they did outline that staffing was not a part of their recommended budget and that more conversations were going to need to be had about that. That was not discussed last night.
So I have another question. Thank you, Mackenzie. So I have a question for Sarah. Sarah, if the funding increases from the city side, we would still hold to the percentages that's in our agreed upon contract, right? So is there a possibility that our number changes if the city decides not to cut to the level that they have said so far?
Yes. So as I mentioned in my overview, this current proposed, what you have in front of me for the proposed budget is a 38-61 split. I've been clear with the commission and the city that I believe this is a 1-year, 2026 year only variance from the standard of cover percentages of 36-64, and that we will need to revisit that split as a part of our governance conversations. All that $2 million for station expansion that I mentioned is based off of us paying 36%. of that amount. So it was based off the existing agreement split. But I would say, you know, our governance agreement expires and we're in a 1-year extension and it expires at the end of this year. We meet, goodness, at least every other week to talk about governance with the city manager's office and our LDCFM partners. And I would say I thought we were really kind of on our track for where we were going to go for governance until, you know, budget time hit. And I think we're really struggling to sort of figure out what the governing bodies for both the city and the county want to do in terms of governance moving forward. And I'm still struggling with how to approach that. I would say as when I sat through this initial rewrite of the governance agreement 4 years ago now, I felt like we kicked all the tires. We looked at all the options available. We are a very unique department in the state of Kansas in terms of how we provide fire and EMS services. We couldn't find another model that splits funding like we split funding. There probably are models nationally, but they don't have the same state statutes that govern how we work at this. So I think ultimately this is really going to come down to local governing body leadership in terms of how we pay for this expense. I think, you know, if Station 6 expands, and additional fire apparatus is added, or, you know, staff is added to Station 6, and additional 8th ambulance is added to our system, we're going to get back pretty close to 3664 in that arrangement. So in some ways, it's hard to figure out, do we try to tinker with a governance agreement knowing that we're going to expand, or do we expand and then come back to a governance agreement? And that's really the difficult situation staff is in at this point, all of us, you know, I'd say city, county, and LDCFM staff as to how to approach it.
So the current cut that the city is working towards is 1.5 million, right?
Yeah, I think
Is that about-
McKinsey, is that it?
Yeah, it's 1.496.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the gray
Yeah.
chart here over my shoulder. If the city makes some adjustments in that, so let's say they only cut 1 million from that, is it your recommendation we would take that from fund balance to cover our percentage of it based on the funding? See what I'm getting at here?
I think if they decide to cut LDCFM like that in that situation, no, because our amount, we've already increased our funding amount. My recommendation would be as we try to go back to the 3664 split. I don't think anyone's saying the county would necessarily, we might end up paying a little less because the percentages might shift a little bit. Does that make sense? So if they cut less, so if they only cut, instead of 10, they only cut like 8, or they cut 2, like their amount would go up, and I think that would balance out the shift. So we might actually spend a little less in that scenario. The only way I see us spending more than what you have in front of you in your proposed budget, with the caveat of whatever the commission decides to do here, because you have many options in front of you, would be if, I don't think that would impact 2026. I think it would tell us what to do for 2027 and 2028. Because we're trying to hold firm in terms of existing EMS service provision. So to me, we are providing a backstop to that cut.
Thanks.
Chief, yeah, tell me if I say anything wrong, Chief. Okay.
Well, I had a thought and it's disappeared for the moment, so somebody else go ahead.
I'll take one. So Sarah, we have an ambulance purchase plan. We basically purchase 2 ambulances a year and then cycle some out of the used ambulances, then get sold. When we're talking about station expansion, I think the plan, see who wants to answer this question, is to maintain the use of those a little bit longer rather than add to that replacement plan. And I think we had 1 year where we bought 3.
We did it 1 year where we bought 3. You all can answer specific questions about how many ambulances. I would say that we bolstered when we integrated the EMS portion of LDCFM into the general fund. We took their existing fund balance and moved it to the ambulance capital reserve. We have sufficient funds in there to buy an additional ambulance if needed for Station 6. So I feel very comfortable in that. I will tell you, John Darling's very complicated sheets of when you order an ambulance and then when it is actually delivered is very hard for me from a budgetary perspective with fiscal years to manage. So I want to know what I'm paying for in 2026. I don't want to know what he orders in 2026 because it's a 2 to 3 year lead time. So I feel we've budgeted for 2 new ambulances to come in 2026. He may be getting 3 in 2026, but we put the money in there and I believe there's sufficient fund balance to cover what they would need for their current year and for the station expansion.
Is the price on the ambulance set at the beginning and then it just takes them 3 years to do it? Or is the price negotiable up until delivery?
So we'll sign a sales agreement that'll lock in a price. So we're currently expecting to get the ambulances we initially ordered in 2023 later this year. They will come in under the 2023 pricing, or I guess 2024 is when we finalize the specs. But so the fact that it's a long lead time doesn't necessarily increase the price, but it does obviously make budgeting harder because we don't know exactly when we'll take delivery. Like if we order trucks now, will they show up in 27, 26, or 28? Can kind of vary based on how much manufacturing capacity there is.
And Sarah, those come out of the ambulance reserve fund?
Yep, I think it's Fund 604. Yeah, that's a separate reserve fund for ambulances.
Okay, and if the fire department has extra income from collections or whatever, does that come to the ambulance reserve fund or does that stay with the city?
No, so it comes to us. I mean, all ambulance fee revenue come to Douglas County through our arrangement. And we're billed actuals from the city of Lawrence for LDCFM expenses. So with their reductions that they have in 2025, I anticipate that they're going to be below our budgeted estimates for them. So that's another kind of, how the timing works out. We set a budget, last year for this year. They had reductions and additions, and we kind of figure it out on the back end.
So if there is a station expansion and you need another ambulance in 27, you actually had to buy it last year. And so then probably what you would do is you would not trade in or sell one of the existing ones. You would keep it longer.
Correct. And so a part of the city capital improvement plan that is funded, it does include the Station 6 expansion ambulance. We have not been given direction or recommendation from our central maintenance garage that they would encourage keeping ambulances for longer than what we currently have replacement wise, especially with that lead time being so variable. We are having the conversations of, is it worthwhile to keep an ambulance in addition to our current fleet instead of trading it in for things like the potential for World Cup, additional staffing? That would come to this group to have those conversations, whether we want to trade an ambulance in or keep one. For right now, Station 6, we do have budgeted an extra additional ambulance for that station to open in 2029. So it's not seen in the 2026 budget.
And so we have 7 ambulances that are in the rotation, but we also have several in the fleet that are kind of backup if something's, in the shop. So how many ambulances total do we have that are deployable?
We have 12, but as you mentioned, the need to keep them going 24/7, 365 means that often we have, I don't know how often I could say we actually have all 12 available. In addition, we use them for a lot of our standby events, things of that nature. So while we don't run out of ambulances, we aren't like overly blessed with a surplus, I guess.
So Sarah just reviewed the potential risks that we have, not knowing what the city is actually going to do moving forward. And for those listening that may not be following what's actually happening, can you talk a little bit about what the public safety risks might be if this funding level is not approved, and what would be the impact on response times potentially?
LDCFM has multiple documents that talk about the standards of cover. Sarah mentioned it earlier. Standards of cover, we look at what is the risk in the community and what are the resources that we have to match that or to mitigate those risks. In our documents, we have recommendations to meet those benchmarks, those target goals of response time, and how LDCFM actual performance matches up to that. And with that comparison of what those benchmarks are currently set at, there is recommendation for additional units, additional emergency resources. The current budget does look at a snapshot of what LDCFM looks like today with all of our current staffing. It does not match up with the station expansion recommendations as far as adding additional resources, but without the additional options that have been provided over the last few months, we would see with the budget cut request from the city of Lawrence of 1.5 million, a decrease in services countywide for fire suppression, hazardous materials response, technical rescue, and EMS.
And just to spiderweb off that, in addition to the standard cover document, when we look at like the ground truth for the human beings that we're impacting, we gave a presentation earlier this year where we talked about there are already times when we are out of ambulances and we don't have one available for the next emergency to come in. We call that status zero. Thankfully, they are currently relatively rare and short-lived. But we know as call volume increases without increasing resources, that will only get worse. In addition to that, if we were to cut more resources than we currently have, it's only natural to assume that we would have more often at status zero for longer periods of time with people not getting the emergency care that they need.
And if I can add to that, we spend a lot of time at this table talking about what the city pays for and what the county pays for. But in this system, everybody provides EMS. Everyone provides EMS. So everybody on a fire truck provides medical care. And so, and frankly, every paramedic can assist with a fire. And that is what is unique about our shared system. And so I don't want that. Our conversations here to talk about who pays for what really isn't, it doesn't manifest the same way of when boots are on the ground and an incident happens. And I think that's the real beauty of our system. It allows us to deploy more resources more appropriately because they're managed in a uniform manner, but it does present cooperation. Collaboration is more work.
So within the gray scenario, if we're looking at that one in particular, and it has a total reduction of 10 FTEs, how many of those are actual jobs that are filled at the moment now? Because I know you've kind of been known about this from the city, the potential cut, and there's been a lot of retirements. So where would that leave us for filled FTEs?
So currently, with what's gone to the city, well, I'll start with what's in the gray option. So we have 10 FTEs, which is our total financial impact. And so to use those shared expense percentages that Sarah mentioned earlier, to maintain the 6 battalion chiefs, to maintain the training lieutenant, and then maintain all current ambulances as 24-hour trucks, we show that we would have 10 less positions funded at LDCFM. That being said, we currently do have those vacant positions just through
All 10?
So one of those that is not coming to the county quite yet because it hasn't made it through the city's process is the prevention lieutenant that's funded at 100% with the city of Lawrence. In our budget conversations with the city, and I believe what was presented last night actually included the funding of that prevention lieutenant. So it differs a little bit. So if we're just looking at the 9 positions that relate to shutting down engine 5 and upstaffing ladder 5 to 4, we have 9 positions. All 9 of those positions are currently vacant. We would not be letting anyone go.
Thanks. I was glad to hear that.
Sarah, could you remind us the current agreement expires at the end of 25, and then we've extended it for 1 year into 26?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think as soon as we get through our budget processes, both the city and the county, we're going to come back to both governing bodies and ask for some direction on how to proceed. I think this team has talked about everything from, so maybe Mackenzie, you could talk a little bit about what's on the initial horizon for LDCFM in terms of your strategic plan and your accreditation and how that might factor into the timing of an agreement.
Yeah, so I feel like I always talk to you guys about all these like different documents that LDCFM has. So just a quick reminder, we have our community risk assessment standards of cover document that shows the risk in the community and the resources that we have. Out of that, we have recommendations. You all see those recommendations in our budget recommendations. We talk about those in our governance meetings, and then they drive the day-to-day operations strategically within LDCFM. We also have our strategic plan that is a tie between strategic initiatives from the county and then also the city, but then what that looks like for LDCFM specifically. It's more of a micro level of if this is the direction that these governances are moving towards, here's what that looks like for LDCFM specifically. And then we have our accreditation documents that a team comes in and basically audits LDCFM and recognizes and gives value to different gap areas and then also different areas that we're succeeding. And so all of that is actually going to come back over the next few years, over the next 2 years. We'll be needing to update all of those documents. And so I foresee that we have a lot of those recommendations from the previous documents will probably be carrying over into these future documents, simply because we haven't made a lot of progression towards those recommendations. But with that process comes the opportunity to have community input so that we can have a community-driven strategic plan if that's the direction that the county and the city would like to go. And then also from internally, I know our strategic plan for LDCFM previously looked at a lot of things internally where we said we need to help ourselves so that we can better help the community. So I see the process of those few documents over the next 2 years greatly impacting what LDCFM looks like and what we prioritize going forward.
Yeah, and while I'd say, I think all of that's going to happen, I think our methodology of how our standard of cover is put together is pretty solid. And I think it's really based on how operationally how they work. And so I would be surprised if we vary a ton from that. That doesn't mean though, in terms of governance, that there's a few things to talk about. We've already mentioned, so the way the battalion chiefs are allocated in that standard of cover document is mostly on the fire side. That probably should change. They do serve the entire system. I would also argue, and I'm not having as much success, that the mobile integrated health positions are not EMS only. They assist firefighters on fire trucks who provide EMS care, and they should also be considered part of the shared bucket. So I do think that there are a few things in that would, even if we don't radically alter the number of fire trucks and ambulances on the street at any one given time, there are a few little things that would possibly impact that future standard of cover split.
Okay, so then I have 2 questions. So the first would be around the 9 vacant positions. Do you foresee any impacts to training and/or physical and mental well-being for staff that could impact the county in any way and the residents that are served? And then the second question is around mobile integrated health. And is that resourced appropriately to serve the county and the residents and/or any of our county partners? Because on Monday, we had county partners that were in here and talking about mobile integrated health and support there. And I believe I heard that there could be greater capacity for support around mobile integrated health. So that makes me think, do we have opportunities to resource mobile integrated health a little bit more? And then it also makes me think about how we fund mobile integrated health too. And so and I'm not sure what bucket we're funding mobile integrated health out of. So those are the 2 questions that I have. I don't know if that's for Mackenzie so we can go back to the funding piece, but okay.
Want to start with
Sorry, I know those are 2
health?
questions.
Yeah.
Commissioner, can I just jump in real quick to make a distinction? Sorry. So you mentioned conversations on Monday, and I think those were really about the mobile response team, MRT, that is part of the Bert Nash funding agreement. And so certainly there's some degree of overlap, but they are pretty distinct and separate. And so I just wanted to make that distinction. And what I heard on Monday was really about mobile response team in terms of the response there.
That being said, though, we I do think it's worth talking about mobile integrated health and its current, how its capacity.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question. Thank you. I'm very proud of the work our mobile integrated health team has done. We've actually, I don't want to say,
Can you get
accompli-
closer to the mic
I'm
while you're
sorry.
at it?
I'm sliding. Okay. That's true. So our mobile integrated health team has done a lot to address needs as they are identified. So when they first started, one of the first things they noticed was the number of lift assist calls were going on. So they created a fall prevention program. There was also a large unhoused population that needed services. With a lot of other initiatives that the city and county are doing, we're starting to kind of decrease that population, which means that we're now pivoting toward other opportunities. Where we've been prioritizing our efforts to this point has been proactive, where we identify patients either from call volume, repeat calls to the same person, or crew reports that we then go out and deliver those services. As we are meeting some of those needs, there's also a need to do what we call like alternative response, where we're reactively responding. We don't want to dedicate staff to do that right now because we like full time, because that would prevent us from doing some of those value added proactive things. But we are been working with Sonia and I had a conversation earlier this year about standing up the ability to operate blended teams with some of our other partner agencies to do that capacity to some extent, which will then give us the data to demonstrate if there's more need that can be met and what resources, if that's additional MIH staff, if that's additional community health workers, if that's some other need that we don't know. So that's what's sort of driving our MH discussions right now is we're sort of in a period of data collection and refinement. And as we go through that process, we'll be able to present more concrete needs with backing behind them. Does that answer the question?
Yes. And is it because data collection, or is it a resource issue due to funding? Or is it both?
Right now, it's primarily more of a data collection and integration thing because our patients are not just MIH patients. They often are also Heartland patients or Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. And we have a 3 teams group that's being spearheaded by Megan Poindexter at the SRC that's been really helpful about driving the integration of our efforts to kind of see what the true demand is, not keeping the information siloed. So we're still in the process of working some of that out, but we hope to have more data at least beginning to be collected later this year.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say that I've been very, I've been resistant to adding these resources, even though they're incredibly value added for our community. And I think they're very cost effective because I don't feel like we have an equitable funding arrangement with the city of Lawrence on this. And so you're paying 100% of that cost right now.
And
I've got a question about, sorry.
I will answer your first question about the impact of shutting down an engine in the system and the impact to the county community members. So Ladder 5 and Engine 5 that are both stationed at Station 5, and our new plan or the proposed budget shuts one of those down. So Ladder 5 is actually a fire apparatus that has some additional tools. And it also acts as our technical rescue response unit that does respond countywide. If that truck is on another call within the city of Lawrence on a fire call because we don't have enough fire apparatus in the system, then it is unavailable to go out into the county when there is a technical rescue incident. And so that is one potential impact. Another one is we talked about status 0 with ambulances. When John presented that presentation that showed how the system works and when ambulances were at status 0, obviously, we like to talk to you guys specifically about EMS services. That was very focused on EMS. And so we could do the same thing for fire apparatus in the city of Lawrence, but then also countywide. So it will impact that. We will get to status 0 more often, shutting down a fire apparatus. And then, like Sarah mentioned, the paramedics and the advanced EMTs that we have on the fire trucks are able to increase the service level countywide with any response of any LDCFM unit.
Mackenzie, can you talk about technical rescue? What kind of situations from a layman's perspective is technical rescue involved in?
Sorry. The technical rescue services that we provide, anything from water rescue operations, confined space, trench collapse or trench rescue, motor vehicle extrication, and high angle rescue, as well as hazardous materials could also be included in some technical rescue response. So we unofficially go out and help our partners in the county with those. I'd say extrication is probably our number one call for service in the county. We assist the CFD1 and the county departments with that. And then a lot of water rescue opportunities, both at Clinton Lake, flash flooding. We've gone to the south part of the county and obviously the Kansas River.
You mentioned hazardous materials.
Yes, ma'am.
So as we are moving forward with Panasonic on the horizon, are you taking a look at any risk mitigation?
I don't know that we have currently, but those obviously are conversations that our hazmat team needs to look into. Our division chief that oversaw the hazmat program recently retired. So we're transitioning those duties to another chief officer. And we need to have those conversations with our partners at CFD1 and Eudora City Fire Department to better prepare for those potentials.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about zero status on the ambulance side. As you recall, last year we didn't have any football games in town. Also, last year we didn't have a convention facility that can house up to 500 people. It's my understanding that's going to open in September. And it seems to me with those two events coming back into town, there's an opportunity for more zero status situations than you currently have. And I've just wondered if you've thought about that and if you've thought about using one of those other 12 ambulances if you had the staff to accommodate that.
Chief Darling and myself have started participating in conversations with not only KU Athletics, but this private company that they've hired to manage Memorial Stadium. And so we're currently developing our operation plan for KU football games, but then expanding beyond that, working with the Oakview Group to kind of anticipate fire medical resource needs for additional events that they're going to host, not only at the stadium, but at the conference center. Again, we staff KU football games with our staff, approximately 14 people on overtime, but we've had conversations about being able to pull in resources from the city if that need is there. If I've worked a game where we saw 50 patients. And so being able to pull resources in from the city is beneficial. And we do frequently use our reserve apparatus to staff those events. We've tried to get some information about anticipated events that are going to be held at the conference center. And we haven't gotten those numbers yet, but we are working through that process with both KU Athletics and the Oakview Group.
I will add on to that. So our special events, like Tyler mentioned, we have a specified complement of what additional resources than what we currently have every single day for emergency response that go to those special events, some of which are KU athletic events. Others may be a high school that would like an ambulance at a football game. There are some more private requests that we've received. And so I expect that to be another conversation over the next year that we can continue having with you all to identify what should LDCFM resources be used for.
So KU reimburse you for the actual expense, or just do you have a set fee?
Well, actually, one of the things from the code change that we were able to do was put ambulance fees to be able to be set by the city administrator and county administrator. That includes establishing the fee structure for special events. So it's currently our actual cost for the employees working that, plus a charge for the apparatus, plus an administrative fee. So we do get reimbursed for that, although I believe that goes to the county general fund. Yeah. So it doesn't come back to LDCFM's budget, but it's not, the county's not providing a service without being compensated.
I'm just wondering if you had more employees, if you would have less overtime and in effect reduce cost.
You're correct. And I believe you asked earlier about burnout. Our overtime directly relates to burnout that we see in employees.
Mine's just really quick. Chief Darling, you heard Sarah say that MIH is impacting not just those on the EMS side, but all staff. Are you in agreement with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the MIH program is designed to help all county residents. So it helps basically, if we have a lift assist, the current response is a fire apparatus. If we can prevent that lift assist from happening by targeted intervention of our MIH services, that helps reduce the number of calls that LDCFM has. It also helps reduce the number of calls that CFD will have within their fire jurisdiction or Baldwin City will have. We currently are still working to try to educate our county partners on, filling out course, because the majority of reported patients do come within the city. At the same time, that is also where the majority of population lives. So we actually are meeting with the county chiefs tomorrow night, and we're handing out revised QR codes that their personnel can hand out. So yes, it helps LDCFM fire apparatus. It also helps all of the other county fire departments. Thanks.
I know we're really short on time. I have 3 questions left. Is that all right? One of them, this has been an ongoing conversation. We've met a lot, and one of the things that you've heard us talk about is rural response time, and especially in locating Station 6. We've put aside in our CIP that we're planning to pay for that. But I think, at least from my perspective and what I've kind of heard from colleagues, is that that it's vital to us that rural response times be a part of the equation, an important part of the equation, and how that Station 6 is located. It's more of a statement than a question. I think you guys have been on board with that framework. Is that?
I would agree. And then that will also be reflected in that community risk assessment standards of cover document. Same thing with the Panasonic. That's an additional risk that we didn't see when we were originally doing the current document. So we'll see that and see response countywide.
Another piece that's kind of fallen between the cracks has been medical training, EMS training across the countywide for all of our first responders. A couple of our plans have maintaining that training lieutenant. Does that help with it? Like, how do we bring that back? There's a significant need and a significant gap when LDCFM isn't pulling its weight for that.
Yeah, good question. LDCFM is the training chief, right? And so we recently lost our lieutenant. And so now we have one in the training division. So that's been in our conversations, but it's been an ongoing solution for us previously when we had 3 members to work with our county fire departments to be able to deliver training in a more efficient and effective way. And so that is a continual goal of ours. And so even though we may not be able to deliver it the way we have been, we've been looking at different ways of being able to give the information out to the departments to be able to get to their members. And so our goal is to make sure all of our people meet their CEUs that they have to have every 2 years. And we've been able to accomplish that.
I know you'll probably hear more about this at Chiefs meeting if you're going tomorrow, but this is a very hot topic because we have folks that are going to time out and not have their recertification hours because of that gap. So even within the next few months, it's going to start getting really critical.
Yeah, I look forward to talking to them tomorrow about that. That will be hosted by us tomorrow. And I know with Chief Darling and myself, that is a goal to get us all through the finish line.
And I think the commission will be really excited to kind of hear back what that plan is and how
Sure.
it gets implemented too. My last question is kind of theoretical, but in most of our scenarios, we've talked about, a 24/7, all of our ambulances being 24/7 available, the 7 standard units now, plus adding another one when we add Station 6. Those numbers are confusing to people who don't know that there's 2 others besides the 5 stations in the city. What is theoretically the cost of adding a 40-hour-a-week ambulance? That was a piece that was interwoven in one of the other scenarios, but not cleanly enough that I could kind of pull that out. And it doesn't have to be something you answer right now.
So we ran some really quick numbers using the same methodology as the past. And what we ended up with was the funding expense, which have to shift to maintain the city's budget target. The funding expense would have to shift from 61.75 city to 60.96% city, with the county then being at going from 38.25 to 39.04%. And so under the gray scenario we're looking at, the county's additional contribution is $183,000. To do that at a 40-hour truck, it would be $528,000.
Say those numbers one more time.
Yeah, sorry. It was 183,000 under the gray option, and under the 40-hour option, additional 40-hour truck, it would be 528,000.
And commissioners will get that added to your packet. I'll make sure LDCFM gets that to us and we'll include it in your information.
And that includes additional personnel for that ambulance?
That's 3 personnel. So when we talk about staffing, new staff, we use a staffing relief factor, and our relief factor is 1.27. So we apply that to the number of positions it will take to staff that truck. So we've accounted for 3 FTEs to staff that 40-hour.
So this would be not a 24-hour a day ambulance. It'd be a 40-hour a week ambulance, but it would be an additional resource on top of what we already have.
That would satisfy my question about the football games and the convention center a lot anyway.
Yeah, and it can be used in a variety of ways. And the time frame that it could be on duty, we would look internally at our data to see where we, our busiest times throughout a 24-hour period, and try to work a schedule to accommodate those increases in call volume. And the total cost of the 40-hour expansion would be $346,000 total cost.
Okay, that just threw me. 346,000 total for a city and county cost.
Yeah, but this would be funded by the county. So it'd be the whole 346 would be added to the county.
Okay.
So you add that to the existing 183. That's what gets you to the 500.
That's where you got, I was like, where is the 500 plus
Yeah, sorry,
1,000? No, it's okay. Thank you. I just needed you to walk it back for me. Thank you.
That's all I have.
I will add with that, if you do choose to recommend moving forward with that additional ambulance, John mentioned earlier that we do have reserve ambulances. And so we would be able to pull one of those and staff that 40 hours a week. So we wouldn't need to wait on the lead time to order an ambulance if we wanted to implement this in 2026.
And on one hand, I think this is a really good way to think about how we expand service into Station 6. On the other hand, I worry about its impact on those plans with the city overall and what it would mean in terms of that. So I just think those are considerations that the commission needs to think about. I think it's smart for us as we think about expansion, but I worry about its impact on standards of cover and what the city of Lawrence will then view as EMS versus fire.
I completely agree, but I kind of wanted those numbers for a thought exercise.
Since this is new, this isn't in any of our budget documents, right?
We'll get a copy of this for you all and get it included in your information. But because it kind of came up after we prepared the proposed budget, it's not in your book.
I know we're a little past 10 o'clock, so thanks for hanging in. I do have a couple questions after hearing all the questions from my colleagues. So the difference in the preferred option, right, from LDCFM's perspective, which is blue in our book. So after going back and looking at all of those notes again, and then the previous meetings we had in the past couple months with you, and coalescing all of my notes, because well, I can't not use this joke with you all. It really has been like drinking from a fire hose. Just sort of, and I was just thinking about that while I was making sure I looked back at everything I had sort of written down from previous conversations and make sure that questions had been covered. So the only distinction is the adding one expansion ambulance, Medic 6, correct? That's the distinction between what Sarah has included in the proposed budget, the gray option. And if I'm tracking it right, the only difference between that and the preferred option for LDCFM is the addition of a full-time, not 40-hour week Medic 6. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. And so then that number we just talked about, that Commissioner Willie asked for, the 346 total cost for 40 hours, 40-hour ambulance only, is sort of the, I guess, in between option to that, what would be a $943,000 cost to staff Medic 6 for full-time, correct?
That's correct. We're calling it the blue-gray option.
Yeah.
I like a blue-gray. That's
Yeah.
like the color
We
theme
had
of
blue,
the
we had
outfit.
gray, now we have blue-gray. Blue-gray.
Okay, I'm just making, thank you. I'm not trying to be too rudimentary about it. I just want to make sure I'm tracking all those details correctly. So then, Sarah, I'm going to shift to you. That shifts our percentages, where what you budgeted for, we already went over that 61.75 versus 38.25. If we were to go with the full blue option, that 59.5 for city and 40.5, can you just walk me through a little bit? And I know this is sort of further unpacking all the what's the word that I'm looking for? The formulas about what's shared and what's specific to us. What about staffing an ambulance? If you can just and maybe this is a better question for LDCFM too, but break it down in terms of what about that is a county only cost, if anything? Or is it 100% a shared cost and that's what's reflected in the breakdown that we see in the chart?
It's both. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, it's the ambulance itself but that plays into the shared bucket.
So I guess with the operating for that, I mean, is there anything about the operating that is 100% county only right now as it's written in our governance agreement?
Yeah, right now, 100% county is MIH and Mr. Darling
That's it.
And the
and
ambulances.
the billing staff.
It would also include operating expenses related to medical supplies.
Yeah.
So the medical supplies that go on
Okay.
that ambulance and that are used.
Okay.
And that's, I mean, most everything is in the big shared bucket.
Yeah. That's what I thought. And
Yeah.
to be honest, I mean, I'm trying to pull that out to, to your point, Sarah, about the governing bodies are going to need to provide some direction to our respective administrations about, how to approach some of these issues. I'm wondering out loud, and I don't know what the answer to it is, but is everything just shared? Is there a reason to hold on to, and that's not a question that I'm asking anybody to answer right now. I'm just putting it out there because it's just what's been on my brain. Are we overcomplicating it by having the 3 buckets versus the 1 bucket and really which I think then really exhibits the approach that everything is a shared unified approach and that there isn't effective fire service without EMS service and
Yeah.
vice versa.
You're right. And these are the conversations we started having with governance. And actually, one of the concepts that for governance, it's the most interesting to me is this notion that the county is responsible for basic life support. And then if you live in a city, you pay extra for advanced life support. Now, the problem is in a shared system, there's no way to put a dollar amount on that. And so it lends me to think more similar to how we've done the ECC agreement. What if it's a third and then the cities pay a population amount above that? So, I mean, that's when we start really thinking do we really need to completely rethink how we look at governance? Because, we get so tied into this, what's fire and what's EMS, but, When you call 911, you don't care. You want someone to come help you. And I would say that from my perspective, having worked in county government for 25 years, Douglas County should be very proud of the amount of financial support it provides for EMS services. I think if you look at almost anywhere across the state, including Johnson County and Sedgwick County, our share of support towards EMS per capita is better than those two organizations. So the notion that Douglas County isn't doing its fair share, I will strongly and vehemently disagree with. So I think we do need to think about maybe it would just be simpler to come up with some sort of base amount that the county pays for a base service countywide that unincorporated area taxpayers pay as well as City of Lawrence taxpayers. But if you live in Lawrence and you want a 4-minute response time and you want by an ALS ambulance, you're going to pay more on top of that. And then if you live in the unincorporated area, you're still going to get that service, but it's going to take longer. And so we don't, that how quickly you receive ALS services will depend if you don't live in a city. So that really gets into, right now, Baldwin and Eudora their ALS service is provided by LDCFM. So, and they're not paying into that cost share other than what their county taxpayer dollars are going towards. And those are urban risk environments. So it would require us to sit down with our smaller city partners and talk about that. So it's a very complicated, it'd be a shift, but honestly, I think in some ways it's probably more reflective of how we work in a system.
If you look at our actual budget, we talk so much about the shared budget, which is about 80% of LDCFM's budget. But if you look at the actuals of what's spent, Douglas County makes up about 40% of the funding of LDCFM, even though the shared percent might be different.
That shift on the blue option, the ambulance itself is only $381,000. What we would pick up by that shift in percentage is 1.2 million.
That's what I was just going to ask you about there, because that's the part that I was struggling to unpack when looking back at sort of all my notes and re-listening to presentations with, after having reviewed all of this together, and that part was throwing me a little bit. So that distinction helps, Mackenzie. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think the rest of thoughts are comments that I have and not questions. So this has been really helpful. I appreciate it.
I don't think I know it's not meant to be framed that way, but I think it comes down to almost like an equity issue. And so it's not fair for the rural residents to have a longer response time. And so by no means, I don't think we can have a longer response time in our rural communities. Our rural communities, we have a lot of aging older adults. And so if we're going to have a higher cost scenario in the city so that they can have a shorter response time, then we have to have conversations in our rural communities about having a higher cost scenario as well, because we certainly cannot have a higher response time in our rural communities for them also to receive care.
The only thing I would add to that, though, Commissioner, is it's somewhat about risk and density. So there's something about an urban environment because of the risk and density that requires a quicker response time. So there's just less people in the unincorporated area. So if you wanted to staff an ambulance only at Clinton Lake and have it sit there and only serve rural residents, it's $2 million a year. So I do think it's one of those conversations that we would have to have with our rural partners in terms of, if you live in a city, you pay for expanded services. And if you live in a rural area, you get basic services. And not that you don't get them, but I do. The question is what becomes basic in that situation.
I realize so, but that's why we have to have these conversations with our rural communities and our citizens, because I don't believe they want basic services.
Well,
so Commissioner Willie, I encourage you to weigh in because, recently, right, we have fire trucks, sitting at people's homes so that, they can respond in a faster manner. So
I think one of the things that makes all this discussion hard is that it's two competing frameworks. One is the response time and the other one is the call density, using the resources that you put out there. And I don't have a good answer for that, but I just recognize that that's why these conversations are so hard. And when they're different, when those differ, but the volume and the response time from urban and rural, it's just a lot for us to wrestle with. And I think we will continue to.
And I have heard sometimes from rural residents that they don't want to pay the same amount in taxes that people who pay in the city. And so I think ultimately that's what's going to come down to is if you want advanced level services, it's advanced level taxes.
Well, I think we just open it up and we have conversations about it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, because we are a rural community, we're agricultural. And so we still have to figure out how to support those that support us, that feed us.
And I do have, I think 2 more questions real quick for LDCFM. The 40-hour-a-week ambulance would be staffed with 3 full-time, is that what I heard? And then if it was a full-time medic 6, that would be 8 staff positions. Am I tracking that
We would
correct?
need to add 3 FTE positions for a 40-hour truck to compensate for vacation leave, things like that. It would be staffed by 2 people per shift. Same thing with a full-time truck, but it would have then 3 shifts, so that's 6 people, but then you need to add a second FTE spot to cover for vacancies for the relief factor.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure I was tracking that right. Thanks. And then Sarah, to your point earlier about, really what I am weighing and trying to consider is on a financial level, if I just, sort of remove the thoughts I have about wanting to not just maintain service, but increase service to meet the demand from a financial perspective, is there something to be said for considering that we absorb some of those costs, begin some of those costs now, knowing that operating will be a part of the station expansion when station expansion is complete? It would be this Medic 6 would be potentially stationed there. It would be used and stationed elsewhere now if it were online, eventually stationed at Station 6. So is there something to be said for beginning to allocate some of those funds this year, and then it wouldn't be a $2 million jump in the future, knowing that it shifts our percentages more this year, but we've already made the distinction that this is an exception year, not to, be tied to future governance agreements. Sorry, that was long-winded.
It's all right. On one hand, yes, from a county perspective, it is a sounder financial stewardship for us to work towards this. On the other hand, with all fairness to LDCFM, this station has been planned for a decade, right? And the city has not committed to adding staff. And I'm very reluctant for us to be the first organization as the minority partner in the partnership that is committing, because the majority partner has not committed.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, we've got a bunch of economic development people wanting to talk to us. But I want to make sure we leave plenty of time for this as well. These are all important decisions. Any other questions that you have for our partners? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to recommend that we take a 5-minute break here and come back at 10:30, or I guess that's a 7-minute break. Come back at 10:30 and we'll start with our economic development partners. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. All right, welcome to our economic development partners. We're back for round 2 here on July 9th. Here we have the Baldwin City Chamber and Douglas County Core. They both have new budget requests for us. And then we have partners that we've worked with before: Economic Development Corporation, Peasley Tech, KU Innovation Park, and KU Small Business Development Center. None of those 4 have supplemental requests. Sean is here, and I think he'll probably kick us off.
Thank you, Commissioner. You've actually done a pretty good job of what I was going to say. We do have a kind of a collection of both existing partners and then new partners coming to the table. I do just want to have everybody kind of go through so everybody knows who's who, both here and then in the audience as well. So Dana, I'll probably pass it over to you first.
I'm Dana Mullis. I am the director of the Baldwin City Chamber of Commerce.
You could turn in the button.
Thank you. Kyle Johnson, Executive Director of Douglas County Core.
My name is Christina Edwards. I'm the Regional Director of the KU Small Business Development Center.
Steve Kelly, I'm the Vice President for Economic Development for the EDC.
Good morning, Bonnie Lowe, CEO of the Chamber and also with EDC.
Good morning, everyone. Adam Courtney, CEO of the KU Innovation Park.
Good morning, Kevin Kelly, Peasley Tech.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I do just kind of want to put this into sort of broad terms again, as I did yesterday. But as you can tell from the collection of folks here, we have both attraction and retention of businesses is a big part of economic development. As we know, workforce development is another key component of it. But ultimately, what you're looking for in this space is results. So that's both in the form of job creation, business formation, or more broadly speaking, a broader tax base. Economic development again is just kind of a big bucket of work that's done in the, but ultimately, again, I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of an overview of generally what is done in this space, and then again pass it off to the commission to ask any questions of these partners.
Thank you, Sean. Before we begin, we're running a little bit behind. I want to check with our partners. Does anyone have a time limit? We can get to somebody first. We had to do that yesterday. Everybody's okay. So if we go a little past 11, we'll be all right. All right, commissioners, where would you like to start?
I have a question for you, Bonnie. You just introduced yourself as the executive director for the, Steve, will you share the microphone? So, sorry, we're a little limited. I'll share with you, Christina, if we need to. You introduced yourself as both the executive director for the Lawrence Chamber and the executive director for EDC. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction between those two and those roles?
I may have misspoke, Commissioner. I'm CEO of the Chamber and I'm with the EDC. So the EDC doesn't have any staff. We have a management agreement for Chamber staff to help with EDC. There's no payroll, there's no benefits with the EDC. So I represent the Chamber at the EDC meetings. It's a very blurry line because, to your point, there's a Chamber Economic Development and then there's the EDC, two separate corporations, boards, EINs, the whole thing. So the economic development work with the Chamber really overlaps with EDC.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And can you talk expand a little bit more on you said EDC doesn't have any direct staff with benefits or salaries, but is contracting with the Chamber staff for EDC work. Is that an accurate reflection of the arrangement?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's a management agreement between the EDC and the Chamber for $15,000, which would not obviously take the staff for all the economic development work we do. So the Chamber pays for all of our economic development work, and that management agreement helps really some other staff. But in the expenses that we submit, our salaries are listed in this document, but they're not paid from the EDC. And working a lot with Sean and Marganis here with the Chamber. The document looks a little bit different this year for that. So although the salaries are not paid from the EDC, the salaries are attributed to the EDC through our Chamber Economic Development funds.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
It's very confusing. Sean, does that make sense? Yeah. We work very closely to have this document. It took a few iterations to get there. So thank you for your patience.
So I had actually met with some of the Chamber EDC folks earlier in the week and had asked a question and gotten an answer back, but I just thought for the greater good, the negative unrestricted fund balance. Steve, do you want to address that kind of in what you said?
Morgan's here too, and she might be more eloquent, but I'll go ahead. The number that Commissioner Willie caught was essentially it was a negative fund balance to begin 2026. And that largely results from some of the shifting that we've talked about in terms of how these have been accounted for. The EDC has been, the way it is shown before, the $15,000 that Bonnie mentioned has been showing on one side of the books. It was determined that it really should be reflected in a different way. And so it basically was a $15,000 shift. And that resulted in this negative. It probably would have, reality would have been our actual maybe negative starting balance would have been in the $3,000 to $3,500 range. But the accounting to make that shift so that we could get that split out in the right way, as was requested by Sean and the team, was resulted in some of that shift.
If I can too, I think one of the nuances in how the budget was prepared by the EDC here is due to the audit and the way that you ultimately do your audit as well. Is that fair? So I think some of the funds that you're showing, or at least your audit, is a federal calendar year, or it's roughly June to July, and this is reflective of an annual budget. Is that correct?
So the Chamber's fiscal years from January to December. The fiscal year for EDC is end of March through. So that part's different too, which adds to the confusion. So what Steve was just talking about, the revenue of $15,000 is reflected as a $13,000 expense. So it went from $15 revenue to $15 expense, which is a $30,000 swing. And then we have an economic development budget that shows it as revenue. But the funds, to Sean's point, the reason it was changed is an expense to EDC and a credit to the Chamber. Is that helpful?
In their scope of services that's attached to the agreement, it states that 1 FTE for the VP of Economic Development, the Director of Economic Development, 1 FTE, the EDC President, 0.45, the COO, 0.45, Director of Communications, 0.45, Office Manager, 0.45, and the VP of External Affairs at 0.20 are attributed to the EDC.
I have a question, not for the EDC. So I want to make sure are we okay to move on to a different group? Okay. So to the Baldwin City Chamber, I'm interested to understand, I could see in your documentation how you would really impact Baldwin. We collect tax dollars from all over Douglas County. How would Baldwin City of Chamber impact the entirety of Douglas County?
I think that the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of time towards bringing people to Baldwin City and Douglas County. So we've really been working to build up our visitors tourism section for Baldwin City, which I think really helps the county as a whole.
Okay, thank you.
If this were to be funded, how would you, so as you talk about that, right, what would that project really look like for that economic impact? And then how would you come back to the county and report on that economic impact?
That's a really great question. We've received a $10,000 grant from the Kansas Department of Commerce to create a first-time marketing piece, which we are doing a visitor's guide. And along with that, our city, through our Recreation Commission, has the Placer AI system. So we can really track the amount of visitors that we're getting, where they're coming from, where they're going, and kind of seeing how they are moving within Baldwin City and Douglas County.
And then through that, would you be bringing along some other partners to actually do that work with you?
Yeah, we would partner with both the Recreation Commission and the City of Baldwin. We do have an economic development corporation, and they also partner with us and assist with that as well.
Okay, and then through your reporting infrastructure, would you then come to the Board of County Commission and then provide us an update? What would that look like for reporting on your actual outcomes for the dollars that the county would spend if it were to be awarded?
I'm not really sure how to answer that.
Okay, thank you.
So do you have a specific dollar goal that you're shooting for increase in economic development for Douglas County?
I wouldn't say that it is a dollar amount. A lot of the funding that I'm asking for, kind of the last few years of the chamber have been extremely rough. From 2023, that's when me and Jenny stepped into our positions. But before that, we had an 18-month gap without a director. So that severely impacted our financial status and our ability to maintain membership and provide something in return for that membership for our businesses.
So, I mean, I heard you talk about visitors coming, and that's going to hit sales tax,
Yeah.
right? That could bring dollars back into Douglas County.
Mhm.
Is there anything the Baldwin Chamber of Commerce is doing to recruit businesses to locate in Douglas County?
Yeah, we have an incubator space. It currently has a flower shop in it. And we are also working towards finding other incubator type spaces and working with local entrepreneurs to put more brick and mortar businesses in Baldwin City.
Okay, thanks.
And what would be the economic consequences or risk if the $10,000 were not funded?
I think that would limit our ability to continue to grow some of the programs that we put on. One specific is our Be Well program. We were previously putting that on through a grant from DCCF, which that concluded in 2023. So we weren't able to do one this year. And we're still trying to figure out how to bring that event back to our community. It was a month-long celebration of health and wellness, getting the community out and being active together. And we're still trying to figure out how to go forward without that other funding.
And if it were to be awarded, how would you promote it or message the grant itself amongst the community and or the county?
We've really improved our communication through our local newspaper, social media, and we do monthly events where the public is invited to see what we're doing and just, an opportunity to gather.
Thank you, Dana.
Hi, Dana. Welcome. I just wanted to confirm we didn't receive a request from you from Baldwin City Chamber last year. Was that due to the lack of staffing and leadership, or was there another reason or choice that you're aware of for not making a request last year and then making a request this year?
Yes, I will take accountability for last year's application. I was fairly new to the role and just didn't have a lot of guidance from my board to figure out what I needed to do. So that was my bad.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds like you just weren't fully informed about processes and timelines, so that's helpful context. That's really my only question. I guess I'll just also make a comment that we have a similar sort of chain of events with the Eudora Chamber of Commerce, where there had been previous funding and then no requests and then a new request, and the county commission did not approve that request at that time and sort of simultaneously worked to move direct funding of the Lawrence Chamber into some direct funding that was really tied to the Economic Development Corporation. So I'm just sharing that for a little bit of context because I know that you're new to this process. This is your first time visiting here with us before. That's something that's sort of part of the context for me in considering this request from the chamber in particular. I do see that in some other areas, with the exception of you have had some grant loss, but your fundraising and membership is back up and trending up. So that's positive.
Yeah, we've been working really hard to gain back the trust of our business community. They were kind of left in the dark and not, they didn't have anybody to continue the growth. So we've worked really hard to try to get back up.
I think that you're definitely a very active chamber, and I always appreciate the updates I hear from you. And thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I would share too that we shared that when we, as staff, when we met with the Baldwin Chamber in advance, that the county is moving its funding away from chambers and towards Economic Development Corporation.
Any more questions for the Baldwin Chamber? Okay. What other group would like to talk to?
I had a couple of questions for Kevin. Well, I'll give you my mic after I ask the question. I think you've recently paid off your mortgage out there. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think last year, didn't we give 400 and this year it's 200? And that reflects the reduction due to the mortgage
Yes.
payment. Okay, that answers that question. The other thing is we were talking about some projects the other day where you're building small homes for tenants to homeowners or the housing authority or both. That looks like it's working out well for both parties.
We finished, excuse me, 4 houses for tenants to homeowners, little community on Ward Street, which in addition to creating housing, it provided training for over 140 students through the term of that project. We received a grant from Department of Commerce to build some homes, which we will be building for the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority starting this fall. And that grant created a revolving fund. So we produce them, they buy them, we produce more. And we have some long-term plans for that for the next 7 or 8 years on to continue to build housing.
Is your capacity full or would you have room for more?
I think that we think that we can build 5 to 6 houses a year, which would be as much as we would expect to be able to do. And I think that will also, I mean, there's limits in terms of times and hours of the day to run these programs. We have accelerated our building trades programs this fall. They used to attend 1 night a week, but we had such large wait lists that we moved them to 2 nights a week to get more starts. I mean, an electrician program alone, we had 37 people on the wait list. So we've accelerated that way, which is also will move us up to be able to build 5 or 6 houses a year.
The other question I had is your request for this year, is that still go towards operating costs?
It does, but it goes to support from the economic development standpoint. For example, last year we contracted with 42 organizations in the county to provide training services, including from very large to very small organizations and public organizations as well. And we see this as supporting that that part of our operation related directly to economic development. We're also very involved with recruitment of new businesses to Douglas County through the EDC and also with the KCADC. So we try to focus this on that and our Crunch Business Support Center, this funding.
Thanks.
Thanks.
This actually might be a Sarah question. So I'm familiar with the Peasley Tech budget as is presented. Did I also see in our, like in admin, is there a line where we also support some of the director's salary?
Actually, we just a pass through. So Kevin is technically a county employee, and Peasley pays us 100% of his salary and benefits.
Okay, I just hadn't noticed that before. I appreciate the
Yeah,
clarification.
and then so that's just a pass through.
Okay, it makes sense. And I'm super excited about the mortgage payment being done. So congratulations on that.
But yeah, thank you.
It's so rare we get budget requests for less. So I want to make special note of that. I had some questions for Adam. Adam, thanks for being here. Adam, you've heard these questions before, so I'll just keep asking them. So in your background information, you talk about the number of employees that we have that are working at Innovation Park. Do we know how many of those live in Douglas County?
We haven't got an exact count. We changed our process to start collecting as we issue new key cards for employees. But we haven't gone back to retroactively collect the information for the people that already had them. Their cards do set to expire. And so we'll be gaining some more of that information as we move along, but we don't have exact numbers on that currently.
Okay. Thanks for trying to figure out a way to do that. I appreciate that. You talked about in your background information about the number of companies that have spun out of what was BTBC, is now Innovation Park. When was the last time a business left Innovation Park and became a business in Douglas County outside of the park?
I mean, it could have been Avium was one example. Einstein is out west at Bob Billings in Wakarusa within the last 2 years. So I might be missing some on that. I don't know. I'm going back through my company Rolodex.
Would you say most stay there? I mean, I think, and some of this, we've had this conversation, but I want the public to sort of hear this conversation. Do most stay at Innovation Park, or is it more likely that they're going to start, incubate their business there and then move elsewhere?
Yeah, it's a mix. A lot of the reason they're there is highly specialized space. And so there's not a lot of opportunity for them to go out, certainly in Douglas County, to find wet lab space. There's also a handful that, want to have the proximity to the university. And so, telling them they had to leave and go somewhere else within the community would really do them a disservice in terms of accessing the resources that are available across the street in terms of core labs, equipment, talent. And so we don't have a set programming like an incubator that says you get 6 months in here and then we kick you out for those reasons. And so it's a mix. There's a lot of them that are in there with office space, and they can go out and find cheaper office space within the community, and they've done that. And so unless there's a real tie to the park or proximity to the university, then there's really nothing holding them there other than the office space that they do have.
And if they are there for quite a long period of time, right? Is there any discussion about because if they weren't there and they were finding other space within the community, they would be paying property tax that they don't currently pay.
Yeah.
Has there been any discussion about how to look at some sort of payment in lieu of taxes or any for those businesses that have been there, or maybe just a percentage of the park for a significant amount of time?
Yeah, and I think that's always been part of the plan for the park, is to become sustainable. We weigh that against expansion and our ability to create more economic impact through creation and recruitment of companies. And then we fill up. And so I guess it'd be a balance of how far we leverage to continue to do development versus doing a property tax payment in lieu of. And so there's really a balance there. And so ultimately our goal is to become more self-sustaining and pay a property tax in lieu of payment. We're looking at the next phase of development. And so as we get there, there might be capacity to do that. And certainly thinking about, if we're recruiting in more mature companies, maybe that's on a case-by-case basis. If it's a startup that's not established and has a long track history versus a mature company, then we can think about layering that into our functioning and how we pay back to the county and city.
Okay. Does your board have, you say it's something you've been working on. Is there any sort of timeline for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that we've been making a proposal to, but certainly in our long-term planning, thinking about where we put that in versus leveraging our impact in expanding our real estate out there. So it would affect the way that we finance a building. And so we are financing our buildings out there. And so it would take away our ability to leverage funds to build real estate.
Thanks.
So I have a question then. Are you at capacity where with all of your startups?
We have some office space within our incubator. And so our hope is never to be completely full there. If we don't have the ability to create companies or bring companies in, then we'll lose our impact. Our more mature facility that's next door, the phase 3 facility, is 100% full.
Because that makes me think then, is there then a plan for your startups once they grow up, right? For them to then move out and move into the community, into the county, and pay property taxes. And then you can have new startups that move in, right? And then grow up, right? That
Right.
move out into the county. So I'm just thinking, you can birth new babies, new startups
Right.
at Innovation Park. They can grow up, move out, pay taxes, and just continue to cycle through that entire process.
We've had some of that. The balance is, if you take a lab company that really needs lab space and there's no place for them to go in the community to find that, then you're at risk of losing them entirely. And so that's really what our real estate is to create that highly specialized lab space to keep those companies here and growing. And we saw that in the phase 3 building, an expansion of a company that had 2,000 square feet into 10,000 square feet. And without the lab space, they were at risk of going somewhere else to find it outside of Douglas County even. So really, our buildings are more to house the highly technical companies that need the specialized space versus, a regular startup that, is in software or something. We've seen them go out into the community to find cheaper space as they grow.
So is that where we have opportunities with our economic development partners to then create those really specialized technical businesses and spaces within the county for those startups to grow up and move into those spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I think you would have to find a developer that'd be willing to take risk on. It's really expensive, $600 to $1,000 a square foot space. And having it available when they need to progress into the next stage would be, the barrier to keep us from doing that. But we've seen people, Creditech went from our space and built out their own lab. And so there is the opportunity for companies to do that. But not a lot of them have done that and been able to create the real estate they need for those lab spaces.
Okay, but currently those lab spaces are being created on KU's property.
Endowment's property, correct.
Endowment's property. Okay. All right. So we just need to look at opportunities then to have those that are investing in endowment's property to have them want to invest out in the county.
Yeah, and I think there's also an opportunity, we're not set on building every phase of our development. Hopefully we can create enough impact that a real estate developer would say, hey, there's opportunities to build a space similar next to where we've built buildings. And then it goes on the tax rolls and it's private development in that same area. You see Endowment doing the Dillons out there, and there's going to be housing out there and other assets that go in that park that will be on tax rolls. And so if we can create enough demand that a private developer might want to come in and do that on West Campus, we don't have to be the developer of those. We don't want to be a nonprofit developer. It's not easy. We've been fortunate to get non-dilutive federal funding to support our phases of development. But certainly we'd like to create the demand that somebody would want to come in and build alongside of us.
Absolutely. And whether it be West Campus, Lecompton,
Correct.
Eudora,
Yeah.
Baldwin, right?
Yeah.
Across the entire county. Yeah.
Yep.
We can spread the love.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Adam. I just want to correct the record. I just heard you say that Dillon's, and so as an example, some of those housing developments will go on the tax rolls, and that is not.
They're on the tax roll, but they are going to be, the tax roll is abated because it's part of a tax increment finance district. So all the taxes they're paying is going to pay off the infrastructure that is being added because of the development and will not be offsetting property taxes.
Thank you, Sarah. I just wanted to give full context to that and make sure that's a more accurate statement about what the implications of that are for us.
Okay.
Adam, can you help me understand? You've talked a lot. I mean, the request this year is very similar to previous years, because there's not anything materially different about your request. And there's historically been, commentary that these funds from the county are leveraged in ways that help bring in other funds. And that makes sense to me to a point. I'm struggling to continue to grasp that logic over time, in part to Commissioner Kelly's point, and this is a conversation that he asked you about in a conversation we've had here before, about not being able to identify what the return on investment is in terms of companies that are going onto the tax roll, that are contributing taxes, not being able to understand if those are employees and business owners who live, work, and play here too, or they just work here. We don't have a good grasp of that information. And as the years go on, there are some line items that continue to significantly go up for KUIP's budget, which makes sense. You're doing a lot of expansion. You have more tenants. And so your rents, as an example, has significantly gone up. I'm struggling to understand why the county would continue to invest dollars at this point, when it seems like that you're well beyond startup phases and there is a lot more activity going on, a lot more revenue being generated. I don't understand how our dollars tied to any particular return on investment. I'm still not grasping that. So I just want to give an opportunity if there's more you can illuminate about that for me and the commission.
Yeah, certainly. The public support we get is through our partners, the university, the city, the county, and the chamber. And so they came together understanding that business support is important. And I think without the public funding, we wouldn't have the opportunity to be staffed like we are to really focus on business services, and which really I think makes the most impact in what we do. And then we would become a real estate organization. And so the real estate itself doesn't support the business services, the accelerator programming. We meet with our companies regularly to provide projects, market research, commercialization plans, financial modeling, things like that. And so without the public support, then we really lose that ability to provide those business services in the model and how it's worked. And so we're about 75% private, but that really takes care of the real estate side of it, and the revenue generated off the rent covers that. And then the business services are really covered through the public support. And then we go out and leverage that. We have to have match funding for a lot of the grants that we get, EDA funding. We had to have a 50% match on a $1.5 million grant over a 3-year period. And so we leverage the public funding in those applications to say we're getting match funding to support those grants.
And that funding is through what year? Did you were awarded that funding?
Yeah, it goes through this year.
It goes through this year.
Yeah, and we have another grant coming online that needs match funding. And so we continue to do that to try to leverage the funding of the public support that we get to maximize the impact of those dollars.
Thanks.
I got a follow-up question. Do you have any grants that you feel are at risk now?
None of the grants that we have currently, and including the $22 million that we got for funding the next phase, seem to be at risk. They haven't been on the target radar at the federal level, and we've gotten new opportunities through the state, and so it seems like there's still opportunities out there to get funding to support and leverage the public funding that we get for those opportunities.
Adam, you have what company has been there? Like, what's the longest term that a company has been there? Has there been any company that's been there over 10 years?
We do have a couple companies. Argenta's been there since previous to me being there, which is 11 years. And I think they're maybe at 13 or 14.
And are they still getting business services?
Not the same way a startup would, but we help them connect with the university to get talent to bring in there. We were able to recruit some of their facilities from the East Coast and expand what they're doing here and bring some jobs with them as well. And so we still work with them, but not on a layer that we would a startup company. They don't need us to do financial modeling from them generally. And so they're at a different stage, but we try to meet with all of our companies on a regular basis to see if there's ways we can help them out.
And how about the places like, I think Department of Ag, or Kansas Department of Transportation?
Transportation.
Do those groups require business services as well?
In the same way, we try to have discussions with them about who they're working with in private industry that might be good to create a consortium around. Thinking about transportation as a cluster. And so we work with them. They've been a good partner in bringing conferences and things that bring in private industry into the park. And so we try to connect with them when they do that, give presentations about what we are and who we are and what we do as well. And so they've been a good partner in working with us.
Okay. Any more for KUIP?
Just one question that may apply to others here. Does child care ever come up as an issue when you're talking to companies?
Yeah, childcare was when we were building our last phase of development, we did a survey about what they really wanted to see that would have the most impact on talent recruitment for them, and childcare was certainly at the top of the list. We had that on our project plan for a while. Fortunately, KU Endowment came in and they expanded Hilltop out into the park as a result of that. And so we have seen some expansion of daycare as a result, but certainly it's a priority for all of our companies.
And how many startups do you have that have been there over 5 years?
Could you maybe get back to us with that?
I can, yeah. I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay, yeah, maybe like over 5 years, then maybe over 10 years. And then just kind of curious if you have like annual operating, no, maybe just like revenue for those startups as well that have been there over 5 years and over 10 years.
I could do that.
Thank you.
Other questions for this group? All right. Well, thank you all very much for coming. We appreciate you answering our questions. And we'll transition now to our targeted populations youth.
10 minutes.
Lori, do you want to come forward? We're going to squeeze you in. Come on up, Lori. No, if you. Give you one.
Everybody ready? All right. We are moving on to our last group of the day. This is our targeted populations youth. We have supplemental requests from the Child Advocacy Center and the Center for Supportive Communities. And we also have ongoing budget support requested for O'Connell Youth Ranch, CASA, and Van Gogh. I see Katie's over there. Hi, Katie.
Good morning, commissioners. This is the first time I'm introducing this budget hearing group of community partners. Partners in this hearing represent agencies that provide an array of services to our most vulnerable children, teen, and youth, and young adults across our community. You've already introduced our partners, but kind of a brief overview of what they provide. O'Connell Children's Shelter provides our truancy services to high school students, prevention case management, and police protective custody services. CASA provides advocates to youth who are in the care of the court due to abuse and neglect. Van Gogh uses art-based employment opportunities to provide job training and life skills to teens and young adults through various programs. One of my favorites, which is the Van Gogh Jams program. Center for Supportive Communities provides our truancy services to our elementary and middle school students, and the Children's Advocacy Center provides child-centered multidisciplinary teams to respond to disclosures of abuse by children in our community. For the two partners who have supplemental requests, the request before you from the Center for Supportive Community, their operations were significantly impacted by the cut to AmeriCorps funding in April of this year by the federal administration. This funding provided significant support to staff and to staff salaries and provided educational stipends for the volunteer mentors that are utilized for that program. You have 3 supplemental requests from CSC. One is to assist with recovering the loss of this AmeriCorps funding. One to add an additional board certified behavior analyst staff, and then additional funding for salary adjustments. We historically have not had supplemental requests from the Children's Advocacy Center, but you do this year. The CAC has previously, and I'm going to say Bev has done a great job in the narrative of this. So if I mess this part up, she's going to be able to do much better explaining this than me. But the CAC previously received funding through a non-renewal 3-year grant from the National Children's Alliance, which they previously used to provide mental health services for the children served by their center. At the end of that 3-year cycle, which was last year, they were still able to and did continue to receive this funding, but they had to do so in a different funding category. So to that end, to still provide the need for this, to meet the need of the specialized trauma-focused services for children in their care, in order to supplement that funding, CAC did receive has received funding this year from the Douglas County Community Foundation to go towards those mental health services, and they're also using some unrestricted funds and donor support. But the supplemental request that you have for CAC is to provide a more to really meet that need in the anticipated need of that for next year. That's all I have, Commissioner.
Thank you. All right. Commissioners, do you have questions for this group?
I have a question for the Children's Advocacy Center. One of the lines in your report was saying that SDA Care Center had previously provided services for the age group that you serve, and now they're not. Can you just talk about that impact, either dollar-wise or on your services overall?
There we go. Yeah, thanks for the question. So that has kind of evolved over the last few years. And I can't speak for them to why that is. I know cut in staff is part of it. And also us being available to take care of that need for kids receiving trauma therapy. So I can't really speak to why they're no longer, providing therapy for kids under 14, but that's just the last notification that we have from them.
Was that when they were providing that service, was that a pretty big part of your overall mission? I mean, is it a significant gap there?
Yeah, we worked together to make sure. The important thing is any kids that come through a CAC need to receive trauma-focused modality for therapy. So it really needs to be specific types of therapy. And so we found that although we have a lot of therapists in our community, we don't necessarily have an overabundance of those providing trauma-focused therapy. So part of what we did with the grant that expired at the end of last year was we trained 7 local therapists in TFCBT, which is a trauma-focused modality. So that's one of the things we used that funding for that expired.
So the supplemental request, that's towards training area providers, or is it to provide the service or a voucher or something?
That's for direct therapy. So currently, any child that's in need of trauma therapy and or a caregiver or a sibling that's been impacted receives a referral to specific trauma therapy. We try to go where they have insurance, try to go to some of our providers that don't have fees. But those who don't fall into any of those categories, these funds are used to ensure that there is no financial barrier. We also work on transportational barriers to make sure there's no barrier to service anytime their child's been through a traumatic experience.
Thank you. That's all my only questions there.
So I remember when we had our first budget request from the Children's Advocacy Center, and my recollection was that was to get it stood up and active. How we decided on that $40,000 mark, I'm not totally sure, but today, as you look years later, what do you think the county's budget is responsible for funding?
You mean like what percentage of our overall budget?
Not what percentage. When
Like
you
what
think
it's used
about
for?
the dollars that come from Douglas County, does it help with a match? Does it help? Is there a specific program it's funding? You know, like what is Douglas County's specific role when you see 40 and now asking for 50? You know, so if we're now starting to sponsor a specific program.
So the supplemental ask is, sorry, the supplemental ask is really looking into just next year. And then we have some other grant asks for full-time therapists that are pending. The 40,000 it has remained consistent. I wasn't here when that first ask went in, so my guess and your guess are probably similar. What we use that 40,000 for is a little bit of everything. We use it match for some of our state grants, our federal grants, and to fill those gaps that are missed. I think most of us that work in the grant world know rarely does some grant pay 100% of what you need. It'll pay 80% or a different amount. And so then you have to come up with that. So it's the Douglas County money is instrumental for us to be able to fill all those gaps, whether it's for therapy or advocacy or supplies, utilities. It can be just a little bit of everything. So it does remain consistent and is vital to us as the only grant that we get that allows us that flexibility to make up and fill those gaps where we need to.
And I heard Sarah did not put this on as a one-time. Well, it does say mental health sales tax there, doesn't it, Sarah?
It does say that, but the one time was that you just mentioned, Bev, was news to me. I didn't read that in the narrative. It didn't come across that way. It seemed like an ongoing request to be able to fund services specific to access to therapy.
In a perfect world, the grant asks that we have that are out for therapy are going to be able to allow us to transition into full-time therapists on staff. So that is the long-term goal, not to play piecemealing money together every year to cover therapy for kids who are already in therapy. So that this 10,000 would allow the kids that are already in therapy or ones that in the next few months to continue with the same therapist they're with, regardless of if we have funds to hire full-time staff, because we don't move kids, you know, mid-year for therapy or, you know, mid-treatment. You want to keep them with where they're at. And sometimes we have kids and families who are really, they want a male therapist, you know, and if you don't have one available, you have to find one. They want somebody who's receptive to their beliefs and their faith or their identity. And so we want to be sure we have that flexibility. Mm-hmm.
So then are you saying that the funding is going to So then state again, what are you stating that the funding is going towards?
So the supplemental ask is specific to cover those therapy costs. So at this point, we were budgeting close to 13,000 for the year. I will say we've already spent $7,000 in therapy in 5 months. So it's definitely, the need is definitely there. So the 10,000 supplemental ask is specific to covering therapy costs.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then how do you report your outcomes back to the county?
Because they're below $80,000, they are on a community partner agreement, so they are not required to submit key performance measures.
Okay.
Commissioner, does it help to have it like an overview of the difference between community partner agreement and service agreement? That's sort of been something that this commission has been working to develop and evolve in recent budget cycles. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, it's just, we, at below a certain amount, we require less reporting and we don't require invoicing. We give them 2 payments a year. They still sign an agreement with us. They still submit their 990s, but they're not held to a higher standard, which requires monthly or quarterly reporting and monthly or quarterly invoicing. And so they would still be below this amount if you gave them the supplemental or at their current amount.
And typically those, I think I'm speaking accurately when I say sort of all those partners that are still considered community partners that fall under that funding threshold are, the county dollars are operational in nature, and they are not necessarily funding specific services, which is part of why Commissioner Kelly asked that distinguishing question, because the sort of the current funding and ongoing funding ask from CAC is that operational funding that doesn't have service-specific key performance measure indicators, but the supplemental request is service-specific, and so it's a little bit of a different conversation. But it is helpful to understand that from your perspective, from CAC's perspective, it's a one-time request because you have other long-term goals. So
Van Gogh's in that same boat. They're also on a community partner agreement. They're not on a service agreement. And CASA is as well. They are on a community partner agreement, not on a service agreement.
Do we request impact reports or any annual reports at the end of the year for any of those partners?
They're 990. Yeah, just their financials.
Thank you.
And I've always found partners across both of those definitions to be really responsive when I've asked for feedback or, just more information or to sit down and meet and learn more about the organization. I've really valued those conversations when I've had them.
But I would say for some small organizations, moving to a service agreement where you are reimbursed for services, so you have to incur the cost first and then reimburse and then submit for invoice for payment is burdensome. So we try to be cautious about who we put that burden on.
I will say that one place that I guess we try to put our performance indicators is in our application every single year because we don't have those requirements, and we do want you to know what we're doing with the funds and how we're performing with those funds.
Yes, thank you. I did notice that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you mind unmuting one more time and introducing yourself just for anybody who's listening?
Hi, my name is Lori McSorley, and I'm the Executive Director of Van Gogh.
One last question for CAC, and I don't know that it really relates, so it could just be an ignorant question. You mentioned that there had been some grant funding that was helping specific to the therapy and associated costs with access to that, and that grant funding is over. You have other long-term plans. Are there any, since so many of the referrals, maybe all of the referrals, at least most, are originate from law enforcement partners, in the context of a crime being reported, is there any opportunity around like crime victims compensation that is able to help with that? I understand that you're working to try and cover the cost so that there's not an upfront cost and that doesn't create a barrier to children and families. But I'm familiar with crime victims compensation, but less so in the sort of child abuse space and how it would look for therapeutic stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to crime victims compensation, that information is given to every family that we work with. We actually have a new advocate based on the grant that ended for therapy. And then we switched it to advocacy. So part of her role now is to really go through that with every family and see if they want to apply. They don't have to use it right away. They can have it kind of on the back burner. Also, our partners at the district attorney's office, their victim witness coordinators, really take the time to work with a family for victims' compensation also. Also, their office, as opposed to law enforcement, does have some vouchers that they offer for mental health support. So we work closely with them to decide, okay, what's the best steps for the family? Can those vouchers be used for where we think the best place for the child to be placed? Who's the best provider? And how to do that. And I know that the vouchers that they have, there's so many offered, which is wonderful, but we also know that therapy is more than a few sessions. So then we can step in and help support that.
Thanks for filling that in. It sounds like there are some other avenues to explore, but then, the goal is to be able to remove any remaining barriers to access for any of the children or families that you serve.
Yeah,
okay,
definitely.
thanks.
Thanks.
I have some questions for the Center for Supportive Communities. You have 3 requests here. On your budget detail, 93,000 is listed under other. What is that other?
Good question. And really quick, let me just introduce myself. I am Dr. Kelsey Dockman. I am the co-founder and executive director of Center for Supportive Communities. I'm also the support ed director. And I'm joined here by Madison Graham, who is also my co-founder. And she does a lot of our data management and reporting. I'm also joined by our partners at Criminal Justice Services, Kate Holman and Pam Weegan. So thank you for having us. To talk about your question, that is for contributed professional services. So we have a juvenile services officer at CJS who is appointed to the support ed program. So it's not coming out of our budget, out of CSC's funds, but it is a donated service. So those are our in-kind service contributions. And they're also reflected under professional fees.
So they're in-kind services, but they come from Douglas County?
Correct.
Correct. Well, one of the professionals. We also have HR and legal volunteers who have helped us a lot, and those are also included as in-kind.
Okay. So if I just want to make sure I'm doing my math correctly. If I took a percentage of that out, right, because that's actually being provided by Douglas County, right, and I put that to the 150 that we give, and then that we've allocated in the past, and then there are additional asks for 24,000, 80,000, and 170,000. That's actually more than your current operating budget. Is that accurate?
Well, so the first budget request analysis that you see, that reflects our current status without the AmeriCorps grant. So our salaries are pretty low and those do not match what our current salaries are. So it is a little confusing because we didn't find out that the AmeriCorps grant wasn't going to be operating until April. This application looked very different when I submitted it the first time, but obviously I had to change everything when we lost that funding. So
the additional position would grow their services. So that's what you're seeing there, Commissioner, is that one of the requests is to offset the AmeriCorps, loss of AmeriCorps funding. And then the other 2 requests are to expand their service, one to add an additional staff person and one to increase salaries. So it's both a replacement and an expansion.
Okay, so here's, and maybe I'm just thinking out loud, but if we take this, the criminal justice services, the 150,000 and the 170,000 requests, that is more than half of your budget would be coming from Douglas County. Is that correct?
yes, previously though, that's the situation that we are in now because we were pretty blindsided by us losing the AmeriCorps grant. previously, the AmeriCorps grant funded most of the program, not Douglas County. But yes, that is the situation that we are in now.
And I would say, commissioners, and I want us to have this conversation. And I mentioned this to Dr. Dockman when we had our budget review with staff. I'm very concerned about the ability of CSC to be able to operate without an addition from us. I don't know how they're going to continue to provide the supports. But it is a huge ask to more than double their current funding. So to that end, I do think, the criminal justice services staff, the support ed staff, we need to work on a plan B in case this doesn't come through as to how we would approach truancy support for middle school and elementary school kiddos.
I will say too, I was part of planning the chronic absenteeism goal in the community health improvement plan. I know that that is a big goal that the county has. I also have heard some general themes over the course of these budget hearings, data collection and reporting, in-home services for crisis management. I mean, we have those specialized skill sets that I think we are an asset to the county, and not just because of our support ed program, but also the other ways that we can contribute and help other organizations as well.
Dr. Dockman, is there any reason that you can tell me that it would be better for this to be done by an outside community partner than, you're already using criminal justice services. Why would we want to stay and fund at this level, CSC versus possibly bringing it into our department and contracting with you for those things that the assistance that we think we need?
What do you mean by contracting?
Well,
because that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, we have contracted services now. We just talked about contractors for radios and emergency communications that have specific knowledge about specific things that they can do.
I guess I'm under the impression now that with our service agreement, I am viewed as a contractor.
Yeah, I can see that. That's a good point. And at this level of request, it's really leaning for me to we're becoming a county department very quickly. We've had other organizations where we've had to sort of say that's a change for us. So
I think that, based on my experience working in the county, I have not come across many professionals who are trained in what we do. We work in a very niche area. We provide support to kids and families who are flying under the radar. Not a lot of people know about them because they are struggling so much. With all of the data that I provided, you obviously know that we take data, not just for our funders, but that's part of our process. That's part of our program. And I think that's extremely interesting. And we would have to have a conversation of what that would look like for being a department in the community and what restrictions that would have for us, because the support ed program is right now the foundation of what we do, but that's not our long-term goal. Well, I hope the support ed program operates forever, but I do also want to expand in other ways as well. But I will say we're a small organization. We have a 3-year operating history, and we've applied for several grants. And when we get the feedback, it has nothing to do with our application, our programming, our services. It's always, you have a small team and you've only been operating for 3 years. So I think that more of an investment from the county and having more of a solid team in place would then make us eligible to get additional funding so that it wouldn't just be Douglas County funds.
Can I ask a follow-up question about your team?
Yes.
So I know AmeriCorps was a large part of securing some of that team. So who all is paid for under the budget request that you have in front of us? And or I should go back to 2025, who all was covered in your budget that way, and who was covered through AmeriCorps?
Yes, so let me pull that up. So we have two different scenarios. We have 2025 with AmeriCorps, and then we have 2025 without AmeriCorps. So with AmeriCorps, I was funded at 58% through Douglas County, 32% through AmeriCorps, and then 10% through Kansas Department of Corrections.
But who is your team?
Okay, so it's me. I am the program director. Then we have a social worker. She is our clinical operations manager. So she helps with referrals. She conducts assessments. She makes treatment plans. She does a lot of the supervision of the volunteers. And then we have a community engagement specialist. So she's the one who represents CSC at a lot of the community organizations. So she helps with recruitment. She helps with increasing our visibility. She does a lot of the planning for fundraisers that we do for kids and families. So making sure that they have the basic needs that they need to get to school. Then we also have a program assistant who helps with data collection and kind of the other more programmatic things that we would need. And then we have the juvenile services officer. I don't want to confuse you, but that's funded through CJS, but she plays a very big role in receiving referrals, making contact with families, signing the families, pairing them with the interns, and then court documentation. So she is the one who would attend the hearings, testify if needed, and then continue that dialogue with the court, make recommendations.
So your volunteers, that's part of what was provided through AmeriCorps or incentivized through AmeriCorps. Where will they come from now?
So we've never been an AmeriCorps program. I mean, this program has operated since the 70s through KU. Obviously, that was a big bummer, but we've always had a really great stream of people coming in. We have 11 right now, and that's without AmeriCorps. And typically we get the majority of them when they come back after summer break. So that's not my concern. We have really great recruitment streams through the university, through just community members. We are set up in several different departments at KU to make sure that we can bring on social work, fieldwork practicum students, those who are in training, so they want supervision hours. So we offer a lot, even though it's not monetary necessarily, we offer a lot though for them in terms of advancing in their careers.
I'm going to go back and ask a question about data collection. Kind of the most powerful piece of data that you offered was, I'm guessing from your dissertation, the 2008 to 2018, showing that 75% reduction directly tied to this model, reduction in unexcused absences. But but the only current data that we got was about satisfaction ratings. So I'm curious, do you have local data to share for the impact of since you've not been with KU and been with this model instead, what impact are you having in the community for outcomes for youth?
So you should have our current data. You don't have the single subject graphs at the end, which I know are really pretty. I spent a lot of time on those, but I did not prepare single subject graphs for the last 3 years for those students. But that is just an example of how internally we look at data. We're looking at it in real time. We can see exactly when we need to make an intervention change because we see the behavior spike. But for our current outcomes, which are provided in the form of bar graphs on page, I believe it's 11 of 29 of the supplemental document. But our numbers we were a little bit low our first year, which makes sense, growing pains, but then we were 70 and 73.
Yeah, I have limitations on how many attachments people can put through. So it may not be in the packet because I have to keep down the size of the packet. So we may not have it if
I don't have the bar graphs.
Got it.
So if you want to read,
that was like the end of the document.
If the commissioners are interested, we can have CSC at it after the fact. You've all expressed to me, you're trying to keep the size of commission.
I totally get it.
But I can
I
tell
guess I was
you, just-
curious that it wasn't in that service overview, like here's the main highlight of what our accomplishments are. And instead we got the old data.
well, it should be in the narrative part of it. Of course, I didn't print that part. But I do believe I talked about it in where we talked about the evidence of the program in that narrative part of the application. Let me pull it up and I can share those numbers with you.
Yeah, I just have some more broad statements about our model provides immediate benefits and fosters long-term resilience and well-being without kind of the data to show that.
Okay, so
But we can have you, if you want to forward that to
whichever
commissioners.
one works, I can tell you it now, I can share it with you later, whatever works.
Do you know what your reduction in excused absences has been over the course of the program that Douglas County is partnered with?
I can do that. It's really quick. My brain does not work how it used to. Okay. So did you receive any of like the assessment data?
No, so they got pages 1 through 14, and we have that information, commissioners. We can get it to you. I just would encourage all community partners to be very concise in what they put in their budget narratives because they have limited space.
So, and that can come after the fact. You don't need to look at it, but look for it right now.
There were 44 pages submitted by CSC, so we're trying to get it down.
All the information that's there. So for this, we have a 71%, 50% reduction rate. And then 78% made progress in their overall school attendance.
Okay. You also kind of have a breakdown of different subsets of school groups that or students that you're working with. And it says some student subgroups reach 100% of absenteeism. It would have been maybe helpful to know what student subgroups are those that we're seeing 100% of them are truant.
So those aren't our data. Those are data that I'm pulling from the Kansas State report card for education.
Support Ed overall, the program from Support Ed overall.
No, these are just in general for Douglas County students. And I believe that one might be just for the Lawrence Public Schools.
I don't have any more questions at the moment. Thanks.
Any more questions for CSC? I have a question for Eric. Eric, thanks for it is trying to think how to say this. So your operating expenses have increased annually and your ending fund balance has also been very steady or increased slightly. We give you $20,000. Tell me how that $20,000, how that has an impact on a group that its operating budget is at $1.1 million.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think similar to what's been mentioned already, it's probably one of the most flexible amount of or funding mechanisms that we have. And we also use it as match dollars for our VOCA grant, which is the Victims of Crime Act dollars. And in Kansas, that comes through the Kansas Governor's Grants Program. And I'm trying to think when they re-implemented the match requirement. But since then, we've been using the county dollars to match and continue receiving that full grant amount. So that helps us get about $15,000 that we would not get otherwise.
Okay.
And then we use that to fill in the gaps where other grants don't cover. Yeah, which is frequently supervisor salaries.
Okay.
Yeah, and their benefits.
And is the match dependent upon do you just have to have money from the county or is there a certain dollar amount that you can go up to?
Well, the match requirement is matching at least 20%. So for every dollar we spend, 20% of that has to come from another match source of some sort. It doesn't have to be the county dollars, but most of our other grant dollars are not allowed to use for match. So.
Okay, great, thanks. That it for this group, commissioners? All right, we're done 12 minutes early. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Thanks, Lane.